Lesson 14. My Grandmother. Introduction. This is a story about a 60 years old photograph. Read it. I was 10 years old. My grandmother sat on a string bed under the mango tree. It was late summer and there were sunflowers in the garden and a warm wind in the trees. My grandmother was knitting a woolen scarf for the winter months. She was very old, used to wear plain white sari. Her eyes were not very strong now, but her fingers moved quickly with the needles, and the needles kept clicking all afternoon. I had come home after playing cricket in the Maidan. I had taken my meal, and now I was rummaging in a box of old books and family heirlooms that had just been brought that day out of the attic by my mother. Nothing in the box interested me very much except a book with colorful pictures of birds and butterflies. I was going through the book, looking at the pictures, when I found a small photograph between the pages. It was a faded picture, a little yellow and foggy. It was the picture of a girl standing against a wall, and behind the wall there was nothing but the sky. But from the other side, a pair of hands reached up, as though someone was going to climb the wall. There were flowers growing near the girl, but I could not tell what they were. There was a creeper too in the picture, but it was just a creeper. I ran out into the garden. "Granny!" I shouted excitedly. "Look at this picture. I found it in the box of old things." "Whose picture is it?" I jumped up on the bed beside my grandmother, and she walloped me on the bottom and said, "Now I've lost count of my stitches, and the next time you do this, I'll make you finish the scarf yourself." Granny was always threatening to teach me how to knit, which I thought was a disgraceful thing for a boy to do. It was a good deterrent for keeping me out of mischief. Once I had torn the drawing room curtains, so Granny had put a needle and thread in my hand. She made me stitch the curtain together, even though I made long 2-inch stitches, which had to be taken out by my mother and done again. Granny took the photograph from my hand, and we both stared at it for quite a long time. The girl had long, loose hair, and she wore a long dress that nearly covered her ankles, and sleeves that reached her wrists, and there were a lot of bangles on her hands. But despite all this drapery, the girl appeared to be full of freedom and movement. She stood firmly with her legs apart and her hands on her hips, and had a wide, almost devilish smile on her face. "Whose picture is it?" I asked almost in a whisper. "A little girl, of course," said Granny. "Can't you tell?" "Yes, but did you know the girl?" I responded. "Yes, I knew her," said Granny. "But she was a very wicked girl and I shouldn't tell you about her. But I will tell you about the photograph. It was taken in your grandfather's house about 60 years ago. And that's the garden wall, and over the wall there was a road going to the town." "Whose hands are they?" I asked. Coming up from the other side, Granny squinted and looked closely at the picture and shook her head. "It's the first time I've noticed," she said. "They must have been the sweeper boys. Or maybe they were your grandfather's." "They don't look like grandfather's hands," I argued. "His hands are all bony." "Yes, but this was 60 years ago," replied Granny. "Didn't he climb up the wall after the photo?" I asked. "No, nobody climbed up. At least, I don't remember," Granny said wearily. "And you remember well, Granny?" I said. "Yes, I remember. I remember what is not in the photograph. It was a spring day. There was a cool breeze blowing, nothing like this. Those flowers at the girl's feet, they were marigolds. And the bougainvillea creeper, it was a mass of purple. You cannot see these colors in the photograph, and even if you could, as nowadays, you won't be able to smell the flowers or feel the breeze. Granny said with a smile. And what about the girl? I asked. Well, she was a wicked girl, replied Granny. You don't know the trouble they were getting her into those fine clothes she's wearing. I think they are terrible clothes, I said. So did she. Most of the time, she hardly wore a thing. She used to go swimming in a muddy pool with a lot of ruffians and ride on the backs of buffaloes. No boy ever teased her though, because she could kick and scratch and pull his hair out. Granny said proudly. She looks like it too, I concurred. You can tell by the way she's smiling. At any moment, something's going to happen. Something did happen, agreed Granny. Her mother wouldn't let her take off the clothes afterwards, so she went swimming in them and lay for half an hour in the mud. I laughed heartily and Granny laughed too. Who was the girl? I asked almost in a whisper. You must tell me who she was. No, that wouldn't do, murmured Granny. But I pretended that I didn't know. I knew, because Granny still smiled in the same way, even though she didn't have as many teeth. Come on, Granny, I demanded. Tell me, tell me. But Granny shook her head and carried on with the knitting. And I held the photograph in my hand, looking from it to my Granny and back again, trying to find points in common between the old lady and the pig-tailed girl. A lemon-colored butterfly settled on the end of Granny's knitting needle and stayed there while the needles clicked away. I made a grab at the butterfly, and it flew off in a dipping flight and settled on a sunflower. I wonder whose hands they were, whispered Granny to herself, with her head bowed and her needles clicking away in the soft, warm silence of that summer afternoon. Adapted from the story by Exercise. Word